Hey everyone, welcome back to Pawpaw's Workshop. Today's video is all about building this drill press stand. Now what I did is went out and looked for all types of different scrap material to be able to put this together. So it has some construction grade plywood, it has a few pieces of birch plywood, and it has some black MDF that's scattered throughout this project. This is another example of being able to use up the scraps in the shop to be able to get that scrap bin down to almost nothing. So today I'm going to show you exactly how I built this very inexpensive stand, and I'm not using any special tools. I want to start this project by building the legs to this drill press stand. And after gathering several pieces of the scrap plywood, I started cutting them to length. Now the actual height that you make yours really doesn't matter. I chose to make mine 30 inches tall. One of the things that I want to do is make a new tabletop to go onto this drill press. And I want to be able to get your input. Tell me what features that you would like to see. Whether it's the T-Track, a vacuum system, just let me know what you would like. I'll see if I can incorporate that into the drill press stand. Now, of course, the other thing I'm going to be doing is making some drawers for this cabinet. I want to be able to have at least 3 drawers to be able to handle all of the extra drill bits and all the different things scattered throughout the shop that I can put it all together in one place. Now the legs on this is going to be 4 inches by 4 inches. So I have to cut this down to one piece for the leg at 4 inches, and then because the plywood is 3/4 of an inch thick, I'm cutting this second component 3 1/4 inches. That way when I put it together, it'll be 4 by 4. Now you notice I'm using a clamp to be able to nail this together, and that's because some of this plywood is actually a little bit on the bowed side, and I just needed to be able to straighten it out. The nails that I'm using to be able to put this cabinet together is a 16 gauge 2-inch nail. Yeah, that's right. It's a little bit overkill, but that's what I have in the shop, and I didn't want to go out and buy separate sets of nails. So you have to be careful using a 2-inch nail to put the 3/4 inch plywood together. Of course, I'm using glue to be able to glue all the different components together, and I choose to use the Titebond original glue for this project. And no, this is not a sponsored video. This is just a glue that I like and I use on just about every project that I build. Next, I need to cut the plywood 4 inches by 4 inches. And I have this little 10-inch strip of wood that I slip in here as a spacer. That way I can measure the short areas and it works out real well. I set my stop block at 4 inches and then I put in the 10-inch block down there, so it's actually 4 inches from the saw blade, but that allows me to get a very accurate cut of a 4-inch block that I need for the legs. Now this base is going to be able to go on the bottom of the legs and it will support the wheels. Of course, I'm going to use the glue to be able to attach this block to the bottom of the legs. In addition to that, I'm going to nail it into the position. Now you have to be careful where the nails are placed because the screws for the wheels that are going to be attached very easily could interfere with the placement of the nails if the nails are not in the right place. And actually, as the video progresses, I did have that situation where there was one nail that was out of place, and it was just about the perfect location on where the screw was supposed to go. So I had to make just a little bit of an alteration. But all in all, this is a very easy way to be able to attach this base, and the resulting wheels will go right on there without any problem at all. This design that I used for the leg actually has worked out real well on a number of different projects that I've used in the shop. It's very easy to be able to build, and it's very strong, and it works extremely well. One of the tips that I can give you to make assembling these legs even easier is take one of the pieces of wood that's the same thickness and set it on the side. You can see there it's supporting the top piece of the plywood, and that makes it where it's like having an extra set of hands. I don't have to worry about it tipping over or trying to keep it balanced while nailing the 2 pieces together. Let me show you exactly how I put this together. I have the 2 components for the legs right here. So I grab a second component from another leg that's the same thickness. On the first piece, I'll go ahead and put the glue down. I put just a thin bead of the glue to be able to hold the pieces together. And I'm not really worried about spreading it out and all of that. It's going to work just fine. And then I take my 4-inch piece and I put it right on top in place. Now that secondary piece of wood will hold it. Now this is something I want to show you. Right there, you notice that that nail popped out. Now that's that 2-inch nail that I was talking about. So that in the interest of safety, you always keep your fingers away from that area that's going to shoot, because you never know when that nail is going to turn and it's going to pop out the side. So here's 2 very important lessons. One is a great tip on how to support the material while you're nailing it. And the second tip, keep those fingers away so that that nail does not get your finger. But it's easy to be able to remove. I just grab the pliers and pull it straight out. Next, I'll put the glue on the end and place that end cap on. That 4-inch by 4-inch piece of plywood actually serves a couple purposes. It keeps the leg itself together, and it also provides a good foundation to be able to attach the wheels to it. With a little bit of glue and just a few nails, and this leg will be finished. Again, you notice that I keep my fingers and my hand completely away from where that nail is going to be going into that plywood. This is a very important safety tip that I want to be able to emphasize. Well, now that the legs are done, it's time to cut the top. And for this, I grabbed a piece of the black MDF. Now you notice this is a scrap piece. It was actually used in a different project. You can see the old holes that were used to hold it into something. But as far as the size of this, really doesn't matter. Look at your drill press, look at the base of your drill press, and decide on the size that you actually need. Now this little scrap piece of the MDF that is left, well, it's not going to be scrap. I'm going to use it to cut the braces for the legs. So again, I'm going to use every bit of the material that I possibly can, and with the goal in mind to eliminate as much of the scrap pile as I can in the shop. Now the plan was to use the push stick to be able to push this material through. But quite frankly, the dust guard was actually too close to the fence and I wasn't able to do that. So this is an alternative way to be able to cut the material and still be able to do it safely and keep those fingers away from the saw blade. To actually measure the length of the cross braces, I'm putting the legs on top of the table exactly up to the edge. Once I have this aligned correctly, then I can just take the tape measure and measure the space in between and be able to get an accurate length of exactly what I need for those cross braces. And then I'll go back to the saw and cut those to length. In this case, it's just over 14 inches, but that really is not the important factor. It just shows how I actually measure it. And then from there, those legs can drop into place. I'm going to mark the top of it so I know exactly where to put the glue. Add the glue into this, and then of course nail it in place. Now for the nail for this, no, I'm not using the 2-inch nail because the 2 pieces of material is only 1.5 inches thick. So I switched over to a brad staple, and I'm using a 1-inch brad staple with a different nail gun to put this together. And at this point, you can see how this stand is coming together. You can also see the various materials where you could have the birch plywood, the construction grade plywood, and the MDF all being used to be able to put this together. Now another thing I want to point out, with this type of construction method, it's really not important really to put these different pieces the same size. You notice the width of the MDF is thinner than the plywood on the runners that's holding the other part together. Really doesn't matter. All I need to do is cut a scrap piece of plywood to length, and I didn't even bother to rip it down. Again, this will save time. It doesn't take away from the strength, and quite frankly, it doesn't really take away from the appearance. Keep in mind and remember, this is nothing but a shop fixture on a stand to be able to hold the drill press itself. So keep it simple, keep it strong, and you'll be able to just add the glue and the nails, and it's going to work out just fine for you. In the building of some of the other tables that I have in the shop, I used basically the same design, but for the most part, I did take the time to be able to cut all the plywood to the exact length and width. But here again, it's really not necessary. If you want to be able to use the scraps, up in your shop, go ahead and use this type of method. It's going to be strong, it's going to hold, and it's going to work out. Now do check to make sure that everything is square, because that does make the assembly process go a little bit easier. But using this type of construction where it all butts together, it should work out square every single time. You'll also notice as I put these different components in, even though it's not completely finished, I can still pick it up, move it around, turn it, and it doesn't get out of shape. This actually is a very strong way to be able to build a very simple cabinet. So if this, quite frankly, could fit into the beginner series very easily, and you can make some very nice shop fixtures to be able to hold your equipment without having any special tools, without any special joints, to be able to make this type of a drill press stand or any other stand that you need for your shop. And with the pieces cut to length, it literally drops into position after you place the glue in, and you nail it in. And for my purposes in the shop, I really can't see using any fancy joinery or taking the time to build a fine piece of furniture just to be able to hold a drill press, a joiner, or any other piece of equipment. Oftentimes when I build projects like this, I just make it up as I go. I really just have an idea in my head, and I don't have any plans drawn. And occasionally I change. And here's a good example. Originally, to attach the top, I had a different idea in mind. But in the end, I decided to use the pocket holes to be able to attach the top. So I needed to add pocket holes to it. Fortunately, I have this little Kreg jig that I can put the pocket holes in and then still be able to attach the top to the cabinet using the pocket hole screws. Oh, and by the way, did I measure the placement of these pocket holes? No, I didn't. I just get an approximate location on where they need to be on the left and the right side. It doesn't have to be precise. I'm also going to put a piece of wood on top of them to cover those holes up. Again, this is just simply eyeball at an approximate location. I clamp down the jig and drill the hole. The exact placement of this does not really matter that much. It's going to be able to hold the top onto the cabinet just fine. It doesn't need to have a precise placement for these pocket holes. Well, now it's time to add the top to this cabinet base. And this is a very simple process. Just place the cabinet base on top of the plywood, line it up with the edges because it's all built to the same exact size, and then I can take the pocket hole screws and screw it in position. In most of the tables that I have built in the shop, the top actually was not attached to the base. The top was simply a door, in many cases, whether it was a hollow core door or a solid core door, and it just simply sat on top of it. And that way, if it ever got damaged or broken, I could just simply take it off and put another one on, and it would be very easy to do. But when I'm putting together stands to be able to hold the tools, I think it's very important to be able to have it screwed down. Especially on a small table such as this, you don't want that top sliding. So being able to use these 4 pocket hole screws to be able to hold the top on, that's going to give a good solid stable platform to be able to hold the drill press. I said earlier that I was going to cover these pocket holes. So to do that, I've grabbed a piece of the 3/4 inch plywood and just measuring to be able to cut these to length. I really don't care about the width, just as long as it covers the holes, that's all that's necessary. And now that these pieces are cut, I can actually drop them in and just nail it in place. I'm not even using glue for this, because should I ever need to get to that pocket hole screw, well, I can pull this off. But I'm just using the brad 1-inch staple to be able to hold this in place. To cover up that MDF edge on the tabletop itself, I'm going to put on a piece of plywood. Now the only fancy cut here is a 45-degree angle, and that's really it. I actually had considered just using the butt joint, but I decided to cut it at a 45-degree angle to be able to make it just a little bit nicer. But again, this is really nothing fancy, and it's easy to be able to cut that 45-degree angle and nail it on. Now I'm not using a tape measure for any of these measurements. I'm just simply cutting a 45-degree angle on one end and then just taking the pencil and marking the other end to be able to get the correct distance. And to me, this is the easiest way to be able to do it, and quite frankly, I think it's the most accurate way, because now I have the exact measurement that I need and I can cut it at the saw. Well, at this point, the only thing that's left to do is put the wheels on. I'm going to take the wheel itself and mark the location for the holes. From there, I'll pre-drill all of the different holes, and then I'll use the lag screws and bolts to be able to hold these wheels on. The reason I'm using the lag screws on part of it is that it's going to go through the plywood base into those runners, and that's going to go down 1.25 inches that I'm using for the lag screws. And by pre-drilling all the different holes, I don't have to worry about the plywood splitting. These lag screws will be able to go directly into that material and hold very efficiently. I want to give you a close-up look of where you can see I had marked the holes that I need to put the pilot holes, and then I can just drill right into that location. You can also see how those nails are not in the way. So by placing the nails in the correct location, it makes it where there's no interference. And as I told you earlier, yes, I did have one place where the nail was in the wrong location. To drill this last hole, it's using a much larger bit. Remember, I'm using a 5/16 inch bolt, so I use it all to mark the location and then drill it through. Once this is drilled through, especially for this first hole, I'm going to grab the bolt itself, drop it in place, and make sure that it's going to fit. And yes, it does. So I'll move on to the remaining holes now and get those drilled as well. Next, let's add the wheels. When I put the wheels on, I'm going to put them in position and drop the bolt in. I want to make sure that that is aligned correctly. Then from there, I can position the caster exactly where it needs to be and drill in the lag screws. I drop in the bolt first just to be able to help with the alignment, because those casters, they do want to move around. There's a little bit of play in that hole, and that's okay. So I drill the lag screws in place, and if I need to make a little bit of adjustment, I can tap it over and still have the proper alignment due to that bolt being there. And then from there, with the caster all screwed in, I'll just tighten up that bolt now, and these caster wheels will be done. Okay, at this point, the table is done, and I think it looks pretty good. It rolls easily. I can take this to anywhere in the shop that I need to. All that's left is to put the drill press on. And with the drill press in position, I'm going to double check to make sure it's positioned exactly where I want it before screwing it down. So I'm going to adjust it on the front and the rear, front and back, to make sure it's exactly in place. Once I'm happy with the location, then I'll take a pencil and mark the hole's location. Then I'll get the drill press out of the way and be able to drill those holes exactly where they need to be. By being able to do this, it makes it where that drill press is going to be aligned exactly where I want it. Now, the interesting thing about it is I did not have the bolt that was the right length, and I didn't want to go out and buy it, but I had some longer bolts. So what I'm going to do is drill the holes, and then I'm going to add another piece of material underneath the tabletop itself. So I found another piece of the scrap MDF, and I'm just going to cut it to length. Again, I'm not worried about the width of this material. It's going to be plenty wide. So I'm going to mark it underneath, no tape measure required, take it over to the saw and cut it, and then we'll drop it in place. You can see the pencil line right there on where it needs to be cut. Now typically I would just use a white pencil, but hey, this is what I had. I went ahead and was able to get it cut, and now it's time to put this in place. And I'm just going to use the 1-inch brad staples and staple this into position, because the bolts themselves are actually going to help hold this in place. So this is a little bit tight, and that's okay. So I'll use the rubber hammer and tap it down. Next, I went ahead and drilled all the way through. I had the pilot hole on the top, and then I just drilled through the new material that I had just put down. And with the holes drilled, it's time to bolt the drill press to this table. I think this was a very simple solution to take care of my extra long bolts to still be able to secure the drill press. simply by adding that 3/4 inch piece of the MDF. That created a perfect thickness that I needed to be able to use these bolts. And it saved a lot of time because I didn't have to go out to the store to buy new bolts. So at this point, it's all finished. The drill press is mounted to our new table and it's ready to get to work. Now obviously this is a basic table and there's many options that can be added to this. So at this point, you tell me what options you'd like to see. I want to thank everybody for watching this video today. There was a lot of fun building this cabinet, and I tell you what, in the next video, I'm going to add drawers to this cabinet. I think it's going to be really nice to have 3 drawers in here, and again, I'm going to do them very inexpensively. I'm not going to use drawer slides. We're just going to be very basic construction. I think I will use the CNC machine though to do some box joints. What do you think? If you want to be able to see that, let me know in the comments below and I'll be able to set that up and cut those out. So again, thanks a lot for watching this video. I want to thank everybody for watching. I also want to thank my subscribers and especially want to thank the Patreon members who support this channel. So for now, I look forward to seeing each and every one of you in the next video where I make the drawers for this drill press cabinet. So bye-bye everyone.